to introduce a wonderful panel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is David McQueen. I am mentored by that lovely gentleman over there. I'll give you the quick backstory. Many years ago, somebody introduced me to Liam, and I met him, and it was interesting. I thought, what a tosser. And we had this wonderful conversation. I ended up going on a program that he had at the time called Wavelength, went away and learned about leadership. It was brilliant. And I saw him, and he was standing up, and I thought he was so feisty, and he was so straightforward. He just did not give a shit. He said what he had to say. And I thought, it's a man just after my own heart, just a couple of shades lighter. For those of you who didn't get that joke, get over it and build a bridge, okay? But I went and I asked him to be my mentor, and I found out when he started mentoring me that he thought I was a tosser as well. So it was great, it was great. It all leveled itself out. I still are, yeah, exactly. And so for those of you who are on LinkedIn, you will probably see our posts where we go for walkie-talkies, and people ask us, please tell us what you've talked about. I said, I'm not paying him bloody money to tell you for free, get lost. But we have these fantastic conversations. And one of them was we were both starting to talk about writing a book. And I started first, I'm just putting it out there. And I gave him my manuscript. Maggie, you know what's coming. He tore the thing to shreds. He said, what shit is this? And I blushed, and no one saw. But the fact was, it was horrible, but it was honest. And I think that's the thing people love most about Liam, is that he is very honest and he's very straightforward. And then he went and bloody wrote his book, which is obviously why we're here celebrating it tonight. I think we should give him a round of applause now for completing that. My first draft goes to the publisher on the 31st of January. Yeah, I'm not sending it to you this time. It's not going anywhere near that direction. I'm just going straight to to the publishers. So what we're going to do this evening, again, as I said, we have an opportunity to mingle. Please meet somebody who you haven't met before. Here's some real quick tips I want to say about meeting people you've never met before. If you've got damp hands, please dry them, okay? If you need to leave the conversation, just leave it. Don't tell them you're going to have to go to the toilet, because if somebody hears that 3 times, they just think you've got urinary problems. So just say, you're going to leave, nice to meet you, keep it moving. Try and get the book, try and have a discussion about how you know Liam and the connection that you've made, but enjoy it and make the most of it. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to invite the panel up, please. Come on, panel. Give them a round of applause as they make their way out. And no long intros, I'm going to hand you over to the fabulous, brilliant Jo. Round of applause, please. Thank you.
Dave, thank you very much. Yep, that's definitely your wine. We've already swapped wines once this evening. Thank you all very much for coming out. It looks like a really brilliant turnout, and we've got all bases covered, friends, Romans, countrymen. So let me begin by introducing the panel, and then we're going to talk for a little bit. And I think, if you're all still with us, then there'll be time for questions at the end. So we will read the room and see how your attention is holding up. So I am joined by the author of tonight's book, Mr. Liam Black, who I think literally needs no introduction. And if he does, then you can buy the book and read the little bio at the back. And we have Mr. Chris Thorp, who is Chief of Staff at Jaguar Land Rover, and he has worked with Liam for 4 to 5 years and is another mentee of Liam, who also has some good stories to tell about that. So we'll get to that.
See what comes out later.
We'll see. And on my left, we have Karen Lynch, who is, it says here, one of the UK's best-known social entrepreneurs through establishing the incredibly successful, she did write her own adjectives, the incredibly successful Belu Water brand and social enterprise, and she is now CEO of Expert Impact, as well as a speaker, mentor, and teacher of business purpose in many places, including the Said Business School. Welcome, Karen. And I'm Jo Carr, and I run current affairs for the BBC at my day job, and in the evening I do gigs about purpose-driven leadership once every so often.
How many do you know?
As of now. Clock starts now. Clock starts now. New year, new start. So what I thought we would broadly do is, for those of you who haven't read the book yet, it's got a very clever and clear structure, and it's in 2 parts, and the first part is about motivation, and the second part is about practicalities. So what I'm going to do is, I didn't overthink it, I just pulled out the bits that sort of spoke to me, and we're going to follow that structure broadly, and we're going to talk about some of the key points, and yeah, we will see where the energy takes us, as we don't say in broadcasting.
Yeah.
So let's kick off. So as I say, the first part of the book is about motivation, and Liam, you say this is absolutely the cornerstone, essentially being really, really clear about understanding your motivation and how critical that is. So what is the best way to go about that? Just a small little warm-up question to start
Finding
you
your
off.
motivation. Well, I think with anyone who sort of gets in touch with me about mentoring, they'll say, oh, I want to end homelessness, or I'm really moved by climate change, or I want to tackle racial inequality in the country. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And the first question I always ask is, well, why? Why do you want to do that? You know, maybe you're not the person to do it. Maybe you'll make it worse. You know, let's get down to what those motivations are. And I talk about in the book the different motivations I see. So some people are driven by a personal experience of that issue. So they might have been homeless, or they might have seen their family have to live in temporary accommodation, or they might have been been on the end of some disgusting racism. There's that personal element. That can get you quite far, but if you kind of make that the thing, I'm going to save the world like that, I think you can get into trouble. Some people do it out of a religious motivation. I've mentored some great people who are very strong Christians and see the getting involved in tackling homelessness or whatever the issue is as a way of practically expressing their religious belief. And that often leads to some really interesting discussions. I talk about someone in the book who struggled to work out how you have a little sliver of ice in your heart that you need if you're a CEO, because you need to get rid of people for the common good. And he had this belief that being a Christian meant compassion and you had to love everyone. And there was someone working in his...
You put him right.
Yeah, I put him right. And I have to tell this anecdote because it's true, but it's really good, and it's in the book. There was someone working in his organisation. He took over a homelessness charity, and there was someone working in that organisation who was a complete pain in the arse, had been there for 20 years, had seen CEOs come and go, knew how to play the game, and just made the impact in the lives of homeless people not as good as it could have been. We spent hours and hours talking about what are you going to do about that person. He says, as a Christian, I need to love this person, I need to put my arms around this person. I said, well, you don't really, you need to get rid of her because she's standing in the way of you helping homeless people. And so we did a lot of work about that.
Did you say it like that?
Yeah, I did. Anyway, I got a text on the day that he went to fire her, and the text said, as I stood outside the door to go into the meeting room to fire this person, I thought, what would Jesus do? And then the second thought was, what would Liam do? And I thought, my work here is done. And so there's lots of motivation. So I spent a lot of time talking about that. So if I could talk about Chris just briefly. When I met Chris, not in a homeless organisation, not in a multinational organisation, who decided that he felt he could make a bigger difference in the world where he was, getting to the bottom of what that motivation was, and then holding on to it when you're confronted by all of the shit that we all have in all of the organisations that we do. But it's getting to that one, and then revisiting it. I mean, if you'd asked me when I was, well, as Maggie, my wife will probably nod along to this, if you'd asked me in my 20s why I was doing what I was doing, I would have given you an answer that sort of blended sort of liberation theology, and Gustavo Gutierrez and Leonardo Boff and people like that with a big splash of Irish republicanism. You ask me now what that insecure, needy zealot, one of the things I was doing was trying to hope that my father, who had left us, would see me. And I think revisiting why you do what you do, and hopefully as we get older, having a deeper understanding of what it is that motivates us and where we can make a difference.
Well, that speaks very much to another point that you make very clearly in the book, which is that actually this question of motivation is quite complicated, as you acknowledge. And you quote Karen on this subject, on exactly that point. So, Karen, how do you go about sort of the mix of maybe embracing the confusion versus stripping it out for clarity?
Still figuring it out.
Pardon? Sorry. Did you say stuff it right out? Just
no,
for
I
those
said
at the back?
I'm still figuring it out.
Oh, still figuring it out.
Aren't we all? I guess that's the point. I thought I was going to talk about purpose and making the jump first. So shall I start with that?
Yeah, why not? Well, shall I just segue?
Just in terms of
Can I do a
context.
broadcasting segue?
Go
Just okay. So because the book, for those of you who haven't yet read it, uses case studies to make these points. So as Karen has just alluded to, there are various cases, and one of the case studies is Chen, who's here on the front row.
Chen Mao is here, everybody.
Chen Mao is in the house. And she's got a great story about, the moment for jumping for her, but catch her in the bar afterwards. Karen, tell us your jumping story.
Yeah. Well, firstly, can I just say I've had the pleasure of working quite closely with Liam for almost 2 years, which was, this is the first time in our knowing each other we have worked together. I didn't realise that when you were asking me all this stuff, you were going to put it in the book mainly, but it's fine now that I know.
It's all content, babe. It's all content.
It's all content. Yeah. Syndication. Actually, so Liam talks about, being, a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of entrepreneurs that I mentor and meet through Expert Impact now, they've found a problem they want to fix, and then that's their driver, and then they figure out their business model and figure out how to run a business around that, even if they know nothing about it. And of course, that's going to be fine, isn't it? Well, it's really, really difficult, understandably so. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I kind of figured out what I didn't want to do. So just to, for those who haven't read the book, how many people have read the book? Okay, so we're going to assume you haven't read the book yet, and the first thing you're going to do is buy a copy as you get up from your chair. So
for £10 tonight, everybody, please.
And hey, if you pay 15, we'll all sign it. So seriously, the motivation for me was I was fascinated with the idea of figuring out what my purpose was. I was at Barclays, so I had a kind of first career before I became a social entrepreneur, working in media initially, 13 years, and then in Barclays. And initially I loved Barclays because there were just loads of resources, loads of ways to learn. I was on the top talent program, fast track to director. And through that program, I know, can you imagine? And through that program, I discovered this hatred of waste of people, wasted resources. So I knew what I didn't like. I just didn't know what I wanted to do, but it was grinding with me. And I started saying to people, can you imagine how annoying this must be? What's your purpose? People would look at me, this was 2008, so just before the crash, and they all had a purpose, didn't they? Later in 2009 when it happened, and they just were trying to keep their jobs and sort the bank out. But I just became obsessed with that and knew I needed to do something different. I didn't know what it was. And I am blessed, like Liam is with Maggie, to have an amazing, complimentary, supportive husband. Very different to me.
Really is.
And he kept saying to me, you need to make space to find it. Just leave. Like, what, really? And then I had, is end of financial year.
Can I just say that sounds quite terrifying?
What? Just leave.
Jumping, essentially.
Yeah.
Jumping to find space.
And of course I didn't, right? But the path to the jump, which I did do, was two things. One was end of financial year, got yet another pay rise, but got my big bonus. And the emotion that I felt was embarrassment and guilt. It wasn't me. And it certainly wasn't the love and the passion that I had about working in specialist magazine publishing where everyone was living their passion. And my job was to help them live their passion and our audiences. So I'd lost my way. And in classic style, I kept going back to the bank to work another week, another day, and then I had organ failure. And that was my, for fuck's sake, if ever there's going to be a sign of stop what you're doing, get out, listen to your husband, take some space and find it. And so I wrote a list and decided I'd either be a vicar, a pig farmer, a midwife, and of course my lovely husband said, just give yourself some space. And through that period, I discovered what was social enterprise. And then I decided my purpose was water. Because if you haven't got clean drinking water, actually what else matters? Food, roof over your head, none of that matters unless it starts with the water. So in the absence of any other purpose or cause to fight for, let's start at the beginning. Just logic, really.
Yeah, that's there's a lot there. No, it's great, but it does also speak to the book, which is just this sort of very deep mix of very sort of complex things that go on for all of us. Liam's dad, your organ failure. I mean, we're in quite deep waters already, aren't we?
Don't embarrass Chen, but who allowed me to name her in the book. The experience of people like Chen, personal experience of difficulty of latching a child after birth. This woman is an Oscar-winning software designer. and thought there must be a way of making this a lot easier for women who are awake in the middle of the night, can't latch, feel shit, feel they're a failure, that they're the only one in the world that can do it and can't get any help. So as designed, thought I know what I might be able to do is create an app that maps the breast and the child's mouth, and so you get exactly where it needs to be, and there's a community you can go to get support day or night. And I met Chen just at the beginning of that sort of journey, and a lot of anxiety, a lot of, oh my God, I can't do this, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm a software. But the moment came where she got shortlisted for the Innovate UK Women of the Year, and got in touch with me and said, could you help me do my presentation, because it was going to be grilled by some clinicians and finance people. Oh, and by the way, she said, I've just given my job up to focus entirely on this, because I can't look after the children, run a full-time job doing film special effects, and try and get this startup off the ground. And I've run out of money in 4 months, and I don't know really what I'm doing, but I know I have to do this, because I can't remember the exact quote that's in the book, but I will not regret in the future not doing what I know I need to do right now. And she asked me a fantastic question when she said, I've now jumped, and she said, how will I know whether I'm flying or falling? And my glib answer was, because I thought that's a great question, these are great answers, I can't think of one, is, well, if you hit the ground, you're falling, and if you don't hit the ground, you're falling. And I think that for anyone who decides to give up a job, whatever it is, in order to go for what they want, there is a moment where you don't know whether you're flying or falling, and that's what courage is.
Well, the second fundamental that you lay out in this section of the book is this business about alignment between platform and purpose. Yeah. So I wonder if you can just briefly speak to that, Liam, and then we're going to turn to Chris, who's got a slightly different experience.
Yeah. So I once heard a guy called, have you heard of Aravind Eye Hospitals in India? There's this, if you haven't, Google this, amazing eye surgeon who had this idea. He asked the question, why can't eye surgery for the poor be like McDonald's, where it's all over the world, whether you like McDonald's or not, it's good quality, it's safe, it's the same price, everyone looks the same, it's the same product. Why can't it be like that when you provide services to poor people and underserved markets? So he went around and he studied McDonald's, and he created the Aravind Eye Hospital, which is a route across subsidy business that allows the poor to get exactly the same treatment as the rich, who literally come in another door, but all end up in the same, and they're amazing. One of the eye surgeons there is a guy called Aravind Srinivasan, and he spoke at an event that we organised at Wavelength, which is the previous company I was involved in, and he talked about understanding his life for two bits, the platform and the purpose. You may have your purpose, which is, I want to solve needless blindness amongst the poor. I want to support women at their most vulnerable. I want to end water poverty in Africa, and so on. But what's the platform upon which you're going to do that? And by platform, he meant everything, your health, the money you have, but specifically in the book about where you actually are. I meet so many people who have this burning purpose to do something, and you say, well, what do you do every day? And they say, oh yeah, I've got this job, it's crap, or, and the platform is just not the right place to bring those together. And I think middle-age crisis, for example, or now old man crisis, I think you can see there's a misalignment between purpose and platform. That's why I've understood it when I had mine, didn't I, babe? Yeah. I tell you what, I said earlier on, usually when I'm talking to a crowd like this, I don't know anyone. I just come in and do my thing, get paid, fuck off. I mean, coming in here with so many family and people is a bit intimidating. I've lost my thread now.
It's a lot of Liam years on the clock.
So the thing after the why question, with people who want me to mentor them, is, okay, is there alignment between what you say you want to do in the world and where you are right now? The people around you, the culture around you, and do you need to change that? And most of the people who come to me for mentoring. It was certainly the case with Chris, and he'll probably tell his story, is at that moment when that transition is happening, when they realise actually the two things are out of kilter and I need some help in order to try and understand how I get them back into alignment.
Yeah, well, let's turn to Chris, because obviously Chris is in a slightly different position from, the social entrepreneurial case studies that you described. So, Chris, how does platform and purpose alignment work for you?
Well, it's a little difficult to sit here without feeling a little bit fraudulent as somebody who isn't, changing the world with some incredible...
Not that imposter syndrome thing again.
Oh, there we go. I've walked into my own trap there. But, one day Liam will realise that I'm sort of a capitalist, royalist person that he doesn't like.
Royalist?
But he hasn't worked it out yet. But what I've worked with Liam for a number of years on is really trying to work out that sort of idea of intrapreneur. So how do we make a difference from within a big organisation? And having worked for Jaguar Land Rover for nearly 10 years, it's really got under my skin as a place that I absolutely love to work. And I've spent ages trying to work out why that is. Because there's so many things about it that I shouldn't like, but genuinely it is just a wonderful organisation. And what gets me out of bed in the morning is thinking there's 35,000 employees of this organisation. And if we get everybody doing the right thing in the right way, the impact they have is enormous. And then you scale that to 300,000 people who work in our supply chain. And the sort of community impact of our business doing well and behaving ethically and doing things in the right sustainable way as well is enormous. And that really drives my inner purpose. And that's why I've stayed inside an organisation rather than jumping out and doing something maybe more conventional from a social entrepreneur perspective. So that's really how I perceive my purpose and why the platform of within a big corporation has worked well for me so far anyway.
Can I tell a story about him?
Of course.
Yeah.
Careful. Your night, Liam.
Careful. One that doesn't breach the confidentiality of our...
I have him under non-disclosure agreement, of course.
And that night we all dressed up in leather. No, not that one. No, so one of the things I talk about in the book is often people who are sort of driven to do this purpose are not really good at celebrating their achievements. And an inability, which I have, and I know some people here also do not have it, but I encourage myself and others to have it, is to celebrate when you are successful. Because if you're trying to change the world, let's be honest, there aren't that many successes. There are more fuck-ups and failures than there are successes. So celebrating the successes is really, really important. So this guy here, we meet in Bicester Village, which is horrible, everyone, but it is halfway between where we are. And it looks like the Truman Show and what we're doing here, but it's convenient. And Chris jumped into whatever psychodrama he brought to me that day to discuss. And I said, hang on. Has anything interesting happened since I last saw you? And he said, yeah, we signed off the electric car strategy for Jaguar Land Rover for the next 10 years. And I said, hang on, were you involved in that? Yeah, I ran the meeting, Liam, and I nearly hit you, didn't I? It's like, I said, well, can we just now pause? Can we just now pause? Because when we first got together, Chris said to me, I believe if I can make 1% difference in this large organisation, in the world, that could be a much bigger impact than if I left or joined a charity or something like that. And so, he has, but, like me, we all need to learn to be better at understanding and celebrating when we have those things.
By being hit by our mentor.
That's it.
It truly is gloves off. Okay, well, look, that sort of takes us to our next theme, which I've called Inside the Head, because as we've already all alluded to, it's all about what's going on up here, isn't it? And there's a nice quote in the book on page 47, if anyone's interested, saying, much of the battle to achieve our purpose happens inside our own head. And that's in a section about imposter syndrome, which, by the way, Liam, thank you for just putting that for men and women, because it's so often talked about as an exclusively female thing, and it clearly is a human being thing, and it drives me a bit crazy, so thank you for that, at least. But you've got some practical strategies for getting through that, and what I want to do is just hear from the panel about, let's just accept that everybody has those moments and wobbles of confidence. What are our top tips for getting through it, other than driving to an outlet shopping centre to be hit by Liam?
Well, that is my go-to thing that I do. But when Liam's not available, for me, there's just a few thoughts that I run through. So a thought that I run through is, if not me, then who? if it's not going to be me who's going to do this thing, then who is going to do it? And that just kind of grounds me in, okay, maybe I can do this. The other thing that I then think about is I've met so many people in really senior jobs who are really unimpressive. And you think, okay, maybe the standard is not so lofty. And just basically...
Imposter syndrome for other people.
So taking everyone else down a few pegs is how I make myself feel better.
It's like subcontracting the imposter syndrome, isn't it? Should have put that in the book, shouldn't I? Wouldn't it? Yeah.
Time for the second edition. Sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to...
No,
Yeah.
that was me.
Okay, so think about how crap everybody else is. That's tip number one. Karen, what's your tip?
I mean, for me, and again, with lots of people that I've worked with, an easy one is to remind yourself you don't have to be doing this, whatever it is. You've got choices. And to step back and go, okay, what else could I be doing? What are my other options? And how does this fare against those? Is usually a good leveler. And I just think it's really important to periodically, I do this with my husband, actually. I've married him more than once, just saying. I think, formally...
Can we go there for a second? I don't care anymore about purpose-led leadership. I just want to hear about getting married more than once to the same person. So, Burton and Taylor, what are we talking about?
No, so I met him, and very quickly, so he's the only one-night stand I ever nearly had.
Oh, God.
Married him very, very quickly, moved in, married, full of romance and idealism.
So not really a one-night stand because you married him?
No, I've never had one, still haven't had one to this day. Okay, so...
we're going to need to set this up later.
Do you want one?
Scott, are you watching online?
Are we aligning purpose? Are we aligning purpose and platform?
Right.
Sorry,
anyway, this aligns totally with this theory of, taking a step back, checking and recommitting is a really powerful thing. So anyway, we were full of naivety and romance, got married really, really quickly. All of our media mates at this time, I was at EMAP, I think about 12 years into EMAP, you know what media folk are like. It'll never work. It'll never work. And so anyway, 15 years in, we thought, do you know what? With the benefit of all of hindsight, it was the one time we could say, if we knew then what we know now, 15 years in, would we still do it? And the answer was hell yes. So we went, let's bloody do it again. And it was, and it was
Give a little round of applause, don't you think, for that?
Yeah. And we might even do it again this year, 20 years this year.
Come on, three's the charm.
But seriously, the point is about recommitting, is you don't just take that, in very few things can you make that decision once and then believe you have to do it forever. I think, that applies to business plans, it applies to everything, because, in life we change, right? Our motivations change, our passions change. We might discover something we're really good at that we didn't know we were good at 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 weeks ago, 5 minutes ago even.
Well, you don't know how good you are at one-night stands.
Absolutely. And this is in the book, but I guess that Liam tweaked and pinched one of my best coaching, mentoring questions, which is, if all jobs paid exactly the same, what job would you do? Or as in the book it appears as, if you were only going to have one more job, what job would that be?
If your next job was your last job, what would it be?
Yeah, what would it be?
I like the salary version better. Yeah.
It depends on your motivation. I mean, I use that version because lots of people progress related to salary, not purpose, right? So I think it's a really, really useful question, but I think, and it gets a lot of good thinking. But for me, this is all under this, I guess, belief for me that is, once you know what you're really good at, doing something you're not good at just doesn't feel great. I mean, we could go into all different bits of ikigai, which is also...
I was just about to say you're a fan of the ikigai.
I am.
Yeah.
But, a motto of, if you don't know what your purpose is, you haven't got a specific problem or thing you want to try and adopt, you're waiting for that great idea, is just... Once you find out what you're good at, just focus on doing something good with it. What can possibly go wrong other than a bit of progress, and try something new.
Well, now I think of it, I'm going to break the format, and I'm just going to throw in my own tip, which is from the lovely Jane Clubb, who is my coach and who has worked with Liam a lot and is sitting here on the front row. And
the best coach in the world.
There you go. Seconded, totally seconded.
Apart from Dave McQueen, who's now looking.
Okay, I'm just going to save you from yourself, Liam. We haven't got time.
She's also way cheaper than you, brother.
I'm going to save you from yourself, Liam. We haven't got time to do ranking coaches. But Jane said to me once, that it was very important to spend at least as much time going through the minutiae of what you have done that is good and how you contributed to that, as it is to unpicking everything, as we all do in our heads, that was mildly, as a former controller of BBC One used to say, sub-ideal, babes. Sub-ideal, babes. It's my new go-to, sub-ideal, babes. And I found that incredibly helpful because you skip over that, because you know, because that's just in your head, but actually thinking about, actually, I was the person who had the idea of talking to that person, and I was the person who connected that person with that, and actually, if I hadn't spoken to that person, none of it would have happened. I found that incredibly useful just to draw on in times of wobble.
But isn't it hard to start sentences with I?
I work in broadcasting. Lots of people doesn't seem to be that much of a problem for most of my colleagues.
I meet a lot of people who struggle to start sentences, particularly when it's talking about successes or achievements or change. And just suggesting, Chris, you might be...
Well, I think that's true as well if you work in a big organisation.
Yeah.
Generally, it's about the collective all the time. It's the team's done this, we've done that.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to disguise the I in the organisation.
So it does almost, breed that thought in your mind that it's not, you can never be just an individual.
But there is an I in organisation. It's another one for your next book. Right. Okay.
Well, just I have a tip for imposter syndrome. That is so the name of your autobiography, Suboptimal Babes.
Dedicated to Liam.
Alison, got it? Have you noted that?
Right, we'll sort out the contract later.
I think that I agree with 100% of what everyone said, but I think some really, really practical things that you can do, which this guy does, which is, if you're afraid of, I have this imposter syndrome thing, whatever you call it, I'm going to go into this room, often at Jaguar Land Rover, all these other blokes who are older than me and more, and with all of that sort of hierarchy. No, it ends well. It ends well. Then just be really bloody well prepared. So if you're afraid of failure, don't fail. Just be really good at what you do. And if I may do with Chen again, Chen is fantastic at that. So all of the stuff that Chen had going on in her mind, that's not going to go away. I think it's like a sort of monkey that you invite to come and sit at the table with you or not. But just be really, really well prepared and on your game. And that's and Chris does that really, really well. So when he gets challenged, as he did, and no doubt will continue to do, you've got the answers, you've got the backup. You're not going to be found out because you've done the work.
And whilst other books on mentoring are available, BBC, pardon me, the best thing about this book for me is at the end of each section, there are just some bloody brilliant questions.
Yeah.
And if in doubt about how much more effort or what do you need to think of to prepare, if in doubt, and I say this to my kids in school, when my kids come home from school, I would always say to them, did you ask any brilliant questions today? And I think for me, being prepared with brilliant questions to buy time, to change the dynamic, to actually hear what people are feeling or thinking, and the diversity of thinking in the room actually is being prepared for me is have some really, really good questions.
That's a great one. I'm going to add that to my roster along with who did you sit next to at lunch and what happened in PE, whatever. Okay, well, let's talk about mentoring a bit because that's not explicitly covered in the book, but obviously it's very much part of who Liam is. And as we've already established, Liam mentors at least Chris, and I'm sure some others in this room. Do we need to decide who's the best mentor in the room, or can we just take that as read, skip over it?
There's no competition.
Right, fine. And you talk about mentoring as being fundamentally about sort of helping people with clarity and courage, which, I think that's a formula that will really speak to a lot of people. So that's a theory. But Chris, can you tell us about the reality of being mentored by Liam, please?
Well, he says gloves off mentoring, and I said to Jo earlier, it's really gloves off for Liam, flak jacket on for the mentee. You've got to be ready for what's coming when you sit down with Liam. But I thought maybe to just illustrate the point, I would share some of the text messages that Liam has sent me.
Is this in real time?
No, thankfully not. But we've had a few years' worth of messages, which I enjoyed scrolling through. But I'll start with some of the ones that illustrate your character most beautifully. So Liam said to me, "Oh, here you've got COVID." I said, "Yeah, it's finally got me." Liam, "Pull yourself together and get back to work. L kiss." Which is LX. LX, always LX. Next one, Liam, "How's it going?" Me, to be honest. I'm feeling increasingly distracted by the small stuff and worried I'm drifting a bit from what I'm here to do. Liam, stop it. Just that. Nothing more. Next one's my personal favourite, and then I'll move on. But Liam, what's your personal number so I can send you the good stuff? Me, I daren't give it to you. Liam, trust me, I'm a psycho. But more seriously, there was some real nuggets in here, which I should have given you for the book, actually.
Yeah, thanks for that.
So following an extensive debrief about some of my existential crises, Liam sent me this message, which I come back to a lot, actually. It was just saying, remember, this is what you wanted. This is what it's like playing at the top table. And I use that one quite a lot to just ground myself again. And then the next one, I said a few things that I can't repeat. And then I said, I'm in complete shock, to be honest. Liam said, remember, you're great at this job. If they get rid, you'll get money, and you will have a superb record. Don't allow fears about future cloud your judgment now. Shit happens, we adjust. And it's that kind of very direct...
It's not bad, is it?
Yeah, it's all right.
What time of the day was that?
That was... I can't see that, but that's a good point. After a few glasses, probably. But I think, for me, the mentoring thing it really shouldn't be underestimated, because it's almost like a good mentor, if I had one, a good mentor speaks so deeply to you. It's sort of speaking more to your soul than they are to your face. You know, you have to establish that really in-depth knowledge of each other, where the sort of barriers of fear are all down. And I think that's what that gloves off phrase really means, is that you don't have to worry about offending me, because I know you're going to do it anyway. And we can just have a very, very honest conversation. And then in return, you almost get me speaking almost from my subconscious quite often. You know, I'm not really conscious of what I'm thinking of saying. It just kind of comes out, and then you're like, oh, God, is that really what's going on? Yes, it is.
Sitting there throbbing on the table between us.
Yeah. So that's what it's about to me, just a very, very open and honest, safe space that then ends up in a book.
Everything has its purpose. Okay, let's draw a veil.
It's all content, babe.
Sub-ideal. Let's talk a little bit about the peculiarities in both senses of leading in the social enterprise world. So you mentioned it briefly tonight, Liam, but you refer in the book to the psychodramas of non-profit entitlement, which I'm sure will ring a bell with some people here. And you say, in a purpose-driven business, people are not just there for money. They come with all sorts of motivations. Leading them can be tricky, so knowing who you are as a leader and how you want to exercise your authority is even more important. So I thought it would be great to hear from Karen, who's worked across a whole bunch of different sectors. Do you recognise that picture? Is there a sort of peculiar flavour to the social entrepreneurial world?
Is there peculiar? No, I think it's very human and very normal, and that you've kind of brushed aside the, what's going in the lunchbox, can I pay my electricity bill too? Actually, none of that is important. I need to solve the problem. It's very single-minded. It's just we forget that the rest of the world isn't focused on that problem the same as we are. They're busy, what's going to go in the lunchbox and can I pay my electricity bill often? So, when I did write my own description, I talked about...
Lots of adjectives.
I also have the honour of serving on the board of Social Enterprise UK, which... For me, and new year and new branding and new mission and all of that is, I've woken up this year going, this is the single most important organisation in the world for me, and certainly within the UK, right? Because if we don't get that business needs to solve the world's problems, it's just going to keep getting worse. We've got that, and that for me is what social enterprise is about purpose, it's about problem solving and making it work through a sustainable business model, right? It's just a business that kind of gets it. It doesn't get the let's make the money and then clear up after ourselves. So I have got a slight bias, right? Social Enterprise UK, the most important organisation, because it's there to inspire and to support that. But I spend a lot of time with social entrepreneurs who live very, very tough journeys, because it's like, you're starting out with both arms tied behind your back, often with less money than you need in the organisation, not the right people you need in the organisation. You're trying to lead them to brilliance. It's all, emotive, it's all emotional, it's all passion-driven. And then you realise, shit, I need to run this like a proper business. It's a tough journey.
Well, we're going to talk a bit about getting into
Yeah.
the practicalities as part 2 of the book, but just before we do, peculiar, of course, means 2 things, really. It can mean strange, but it also means distinct. So, Chris, I just wonder how you feel about how you feel about the workforce of Jaguar Land Rover. I don't really mean that. That's not really the question. The question is, how do you feel about leading a workforce which I imagine is quite distinct in its own right?
It is very distinct. We have 35,000 people and many, many different populations within that. And I think part of the brilliance of it is just the patchwork of people that you come across in such a diverse group. But we did a very deep exercise over the last 2 years around, what's the true purpose for all of those individuals in coming to work. And it was something that then, as a board, we tried to change, and we were told, no, hang on, no, that's not the point. It's from your colleagues. It's not from a board to dictate what the purpose should be. But through that exercise, we really got to know some incredible things about our people. And what became very clear was that our position in the UK, in the Midlands of the UK, really rooted us in this incredible kind of working class pride within the vast majority of us. And that's not just the people putting the cars together. That's all of us. I grew up in the Midlands and have a real pride about what the automotive industry is and could be in that part of the world. And that pride just comes through so strongly as a purpose of just wanting to achieve and to really keep the anchor of that industry at this little spot in this little island in the world. And it really unifies a group in an incredible way.
Yeah, the power of place. That's a whole other book, in fact, for book 3.
I might be disagreeing here with Karen, I don't know. I think it is harder to lead an organisation that is explicitly has said we exist to change that social problem. So let me talk about, we're in one here. We're in the Conduit, right? We employ 100 or so people. We've been open for about 18 months now. One of our founding investors is sitting there, and I think there's some other investors in the room. I know, is Kerry O'Connor here? Is she gone? Oh, she's back. So Kerry is the CEO that we recruited here to come and run this organisation. She could, it's probably a good job she's not here, she could go and work for any top-end hospitality business in London. She was running the Café Royal Hotel. She could go and work anywhere. She came here because at the age she's at now, she said, I've done all of this work. I want to go and do something where the fruit of my work, as well as generating profit and returning money to shareholders and being a great place to work, has a strong social purpose. For me, as her employer and her line manager is the wrong word, but the chair of the board, if this organisation doesn't achieve on its social impact agenda, she'll go. She'll go in a way that if she was at Soho House or Shoreditch Arts Club or wherever. They're great organisations, but they exist to do a couple of things. They don't explicitly say we are a community change makers that want to make a better place. We attract some of the best talent in hospitality, from Joseph over there, one of our great bar staff, to Kieran back there, who runs our people and culture, explicitly here because we have a purpose. Hanging on to those people is tricky. If we go away from what the board and the investors have said is the purpose of this organisation. So you have this other level of stuff to worry about, as I do as a chair, beyond is there enough money, and there's Johanna down there and some of my fellow directors. And Arvinda, who's on the board with me, reminds us all of the time the reason we are here is to help change go further and go faster. If we don't do that and are not able to verify and articulate it, the talent that we attract, why would they come here? They'll go, and they get offered more money a lot all the time, because some businesses can pay more money than we can. So I think it does add an extra level of complexity and stuff to running an organisation that explicitly says it's about purpose.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's dive into part 2, which is actually doing it. And I'm going to say let's pick up the pace a bit. That's just a broadcasting note, because we've got a lot to get through, so we're going to need to get pithy, people. I like the quote in your book from Martin Neri, which says, let me get this quote right. It's relentless incremental change is what can get you there. Beware the grandiose innovation plan, which I think could stand as a sort of essentially a motto for the whole of the second half of the book. And that connects to another quote you take from Geoffrey Pfeffer, saying, to effectively lead in a world that has not changed as much as many people think or expect, people need to understand the basic principles, the rules of power. And you use that quote in the context of one of your case studies that we've talked about, which is Kevin, who's experiencing, I think you say something like a profound gulf between the espoused values of his organisation and the lived values of his organisation. So I would like to know, as a sceptical journalist, are there places where leadership behaviour actually matches the value of the organisation? Or do we think that's fundamentally incompatible if we're telling the truth?
Trying to think of one. No, I don't.
Actually, sorry, I should say you're disqualified from answering this a bit because I want you to tell the Enron story in a second, which in a way is sort of case closed, but not to queer the pitch. I'm going to put you two on the spot. Sorry, it's a bit unfair, isn't it? Chris, is everybody lovely at Jaguar Land Rover?
No. But I think that you have to accept degrees of imperfection in an organisation that is as big and unwieldy and storied as the one I work for, which is not unusual in that sense. And, not a day goes by when people don't say to me, oh, couldn't do your job, because a lot of the things that go wrong in the business tend to come to me, because that's generally what my wonderful job is about. But I think that the way I would describe the way to handle that is that you have to have quite a diplomatic approach. You have to accept that you are there to make a change, and you're not going to win every single battle as you are doing that. But if you start to think you're losing the war, then you have a big problem. But for me, I really, really enjoy making just lots and lots of small incremental changes, and then all of a sudden you've made a really big one. And over the last couple of years, I wouldn't still be in this company if it hadn't changed in the way that it has done. So we are really on a very, very exciting trajectory in this space now. So that alignment of platform and purpose, back to the previous conversation, is really there for me in this place. And
I see what you did there, but I still want to know if the Jaguar Land Rover leaders actually abide by leadership values.
They do. And if they don't, they're leaving us.
Interesting. Okay. Karen, anything from you on that matchup or lack of?
I think it varies massively, and I think one of the biggest challenges we face, whatever the size of the business right now, given the economy we're working through, the world that we're living in, is when your resilience is low, that standards tend to fall. And I think whether you're a three-man business, a sole founder, or a huge organisation, I think that kind of sings true, really. But speaking more specifically around, I guess, the world that I spend most time in now and love best, which is social enterprises, and often they are smaller and they are more emotionally attached to their mission, is the worst thing that can happen is if you stagnate in pursuit of perfection. So very much building on the quote in the book. And, and I always, this for me is one that's really helpful is, well, there's two, it's much better to be broadly right than precisely wrong, right? So the direction...
I'm into that, except unless you're broadcasting, in which case you really have got to be right.
Yeah, exactly. But in most businesses, that, and also to have bloody tried, because the biggest failure is not to have tried at all. And the most frustrating businesses that I've worked in, and they were big, I did work in finance for a bit, is, when there's so much bloody talk about what you could do, lots of debate about what you should do, but nobody actually gets around to doing any of it because it'll take 2 years system build, and by the time you do that, the market's moved on. And that goes back to the point I started with about waste. And I think if we talk about the role of the leader and being a purpose-driven leader, the bit we've got to really focus in on is how to, particularly in a big organisation, and if you're going to be the entrepreneur, is how to use that energy wisely. Because you've got 2 jobs to do. You've got your day job and the expectation of the function of your accountability, and you've got this change you want to drive through that and on top of that and in any way you can. And that's the bit that can make, I think, a lot of jobs fun. I don't know about you, Chris, but it's quite addictive. So you have a win, you want another one?
Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be a big thing either. When you can turn the tone of a meeting around, and you just think, if I hadn't been in that room, that wouldn't have gone like that. That's real.
I asked one of Liam's great questions out of the book, one of those meetings.
Exactly that. He probably got that from me, I don't know.
Thank you both. Right, Liam, just tell the Enron story because it's so good.
Yeah, so
It's worth buying the book just for that, by the way.
It's worth buying the book just for this, so I won't read it. So there's a few things in my life that have been sort of constants. And one is I'm really fascinated by organisational culture. And I'm really fascinated by why some organisations will tell you one thing about the culture when it's just palpably bollocks, and the culture is something completely different. So I was going to run up to this in the book. So I'm just going to read it because. So I'm endlessly fascinated by organisational culture and the gap between what leaders say it is and want you to believe and what it actually is. Sometimes this gap explodes into public view. In December 2001, Enron, the energy, commodities and services multinational, went bust, provoking a scandal that would end a few years later with most of its leadership going to jail. In early 2001, I visited Enron's gleaming phallic Houston headquarters as part of a group of leaders from around the world keen to learn from this amazing business that was lauded for the entrepreneurial brilliance of its founders. For 6 years, Enron had topped the Forbes most innovative company in America list. I felt genuinely lucky to be there and not a little intimidated by the power that seemed to ooze from the wood-panelled walls. Before the high command came into the room to lie through their teeth to us, we were played a very high-production video about the business. Over soaring orchestral music, we were taken through the history of the company. We were, as images of others who dared to dream and see what could be, including Martin Luther King, Gandhi, and Cesar Chavez, flashed before our gullible eyes. In a lovely Hollywood baritone, the narrator slowly enunciated the values of Enron: respect, integrity, communication, excellence. Just note, I'm not making any of the rest of this up. This is verbatim. We are satisfied with nothing less than the very best in everything we do. We will continue to raise the bar for everyone. The great fun here at Enron will be for all of us to discover just how good we can really be. As the lights went up, that's all true, as the lights went up, I wasn't the only idiot in the room wiping away a tear. Anyway, it was all bollocks, and 12 months later, the world learned Enron's true values of lying, stealing, bribery, and corruption. Ever since that morning in Texas, 20 years ago, I have stuck to the belief that any business that uses imagery of Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, or the Dalai Lama is lying to you and hiding something very unpleasant indeed.
It's a great rule of thumb. It's like the first person to mention the Nazis in an argument always loses. Put that there. Right, okay.
Except for Adolf Hitler.
Just going to leave that one. Right, let's turn to women. You have a chapter on the specific challenges of women leading, and there are some shocking revelations in the book. Shocking, not the least of which is Liam saying, no amount of my mentoring is going to smash the patriarchy. Who knew? Anyway, you addressed that chapter basically to men, which I had mixed feelings about, to be honest. Why did you choose to do that?
So, yeah, in the chapter, which is called In the Theatre of Performative Male Ego, I talk about the women who some of whom I've mentored and some of whom I asked me to mentor them, but I thought it was best if someone else, in most cases another woman, mentored them, who would tell me about what it was like to be a senior woman in an organization, and always in the minority. And one woman I spoke who was from a financial services business that prides itself on its commitment to diversity. It flies the LGBT plus flag outside its London headquarters. But actually, the way it works, and this is contemporary, the way it works, this woman was telling me, who's senior, is a sort of culture of ambient sexism, which over time dripped away at this woman's confidence. And she came to see me at that point about whether she should stay in the business or not. With her permission, I put on LinkedIn, this is about 2 years ago, I put a quote from this woman, and I was like knocked over in the response that came from other women. And women got in touch with me from some very, very, very well-known companies describing not just sort of ambient sexism, but a sort of unbelievably toxic misogyny that made women, the women that got in touch with me just feel absolutely terrible, and some of them are quoted anonymously in the book. All of the women except for Sue Garrard. Is Sue Garrard here? Who was a senior board member at Unilever, who describes testosterone as the most dangerous chemical in the world. All of the women, even those who had long left the companies that they were telling me stories about, wanted to remain anonymous because they feared that it would damage their career if, even in my little book, their name was to appear. So when my wonderful editor, who's here, and if you want to have a book edited, this is your woman, Helen Coyle, said, "Well, it's a bit grim, isn't it, Liam? You know, but what's your answer to this?" So I thought I will address the men in the room because
only they can sort it out. Or?
Well, not only they can sort it out, but given that they are the majority and dominate most boards and most execs, pretty much, and saying in the book to individual men in senior leadership, it's your responsibility. Is it your responsibility to do something about this? Not the diversity consultant, not the HR department, where usually this gets subcontracted mainly to women who are in HR departments, and it carries on. And I talk about in the book that as men rise up, particularly in the corporate world, I think JLR might be a bit different. We men exchange courage for cash and status. And then as we get up there, and Sue describes this very, very well, and you get to the top, a lot of men they go, shit, look what I've got to sort out here, and there's all sorts of things I need to change. And in a world of Me Too and Black Lives Matter, men of my age, maybe a bit younger, sort of mid-50s, rather than I'm going to take this on and challenge it and really make real our commitment to equality between men and women, just start playing the game. And I can kind of ride this out. I might share my pronouns with you. I might wear a little rainbow flag. But actually, I'm not going to do anything. So I end that chapter with saying, if I was the CEO or the chair of these companies from which these women have spoken to me, I would send out a memo that said, in a year's time, if your team, your division, your board, or whatever it is not more reflective of the society in which we're doing your business, you won't get your bonus and you won't be promoted. If you want to leave now, come and see me and I will help you leave well. And some of you guys may do the right thing for the wrong reason because you want the bonus, but Christ, I would settle for that. More men doing the right thing for the wrong reason, because at the moment, not enough of us are doing the right thing for any bloody reason. So that's why I wanted to address men.
So Chris and I had an interesting chat about this today on the phone. And Chris, I don't want to step on your punchline. So do you want to just take away your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it is a very sobering chapter to read, and one that really hits you between the eyes. And it's a conversation that we've had before. And Liam has helped me really think and learn and develop in this space. But the way I like to think of it, and what I've taken into JLR as well, is we don't want to rig the test in favour of promoting more females, but we do want to change the test. So in many ways, I'm like the poster child of male privilege, right? So I have a wonderful, loving wife who's here, watching here, and Shelley she takes a lot of the burden of the home life of looking after our children and running our house really, really well, in a very traditional sense. So then I am basically free to go and work as many hours as I want to and be available at the drop of a hat and be completely flexible to my work. And it's an enormous privilege that I enjoy, and it has absolutely been a contributing factor to my career so far. And I'm very grateful, and thank you, Shelley, for that. But we talk about it a lot, and we have to kind of recontract that this is still okay. And I just wonder how many women in senior roles get that same level of support from their partners. It's great to hear that you did. But I'm sure there are many who don't. And if you don't have that flexibility and that support network around you, how can you compete with somebody who's just, fiercely ambitious and able to just drop everything and do whatever is needed? So that's what I mean by don't change the test to basically over-promote women artificially by a male test. don't rig the test, change it so that it doesn't only demand things like time, how many hours have you done, how many sacrifices have you made that are entirely superficial and for your own benefit, but instead look at what contribution you have made, regardless of how long it's taken and how many trips you've been on and how many late nights you've been on and all-nighters you've pulled in Japan and then got on a plane to come back. All of these kind of testosterone-driven stories that percolate around the corporate world. No, forget all of that. Let's look at the impact individuals have made and celebrate that diversity. So that is exactly what I try and take to work. Doesn't always happen, but we're definitely getting in the right direction.
Last year we made a series with Kirsty Walk, and it was about women. It was a big subject about women. And I spent a lot of time when I was trying to get the commissioning focus to this right, and I spent a lot of time saying to people, what is the question about being a woman in the UK right now? And I never got a better answer than one of my colleagues who said, who makes a spaghetti bolognese in your house? Now, sadly, that didn't make it into the documentary, but I still think it's a really, really good question. So, Karen, I mean, either tell us who makes a spaghetti bolognese in your house, or tell us something more interesting about being a woman in leadership.
It's a really good point, right? And yes, it's a leadership issue, but it's a societal issue for us all as leaders and wherever we're leading and whatever we do. And he's so good. I've married him twice, maybe a third time, but I talk about, my Scott gives me that freedom, and, the last 18 months more at the Conduit, getting this place open, the craziness of it, along with all of the other things that I do, I've got Scott who literally is let me waltz in and waltz out and tell him all about the great stuff and pick me up on the shit days, and I'll be talking to people about Scott because he's amazing, but they said, but what does he do? What do you mean, what does he do? And I end up telling them he was really, he left Amazon, he retired the first time at 39, he's done some bits and pieces. I feel like I have to justify...
Do you do everything in your life twice? He retired for the first time at 39?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. But I feel like I need to justify it, but it's because I'm responding. So people feel the need to ask the question, but what does he do? And ultimately...
Which they would never do if the situation was reversed.
Absolutely,
yeah.
That's my point. I know if you said to Scott, what do you do? He would say, I'm living my purpose, and hence I'm really lucky, as you are, Chris, with your lovely wife here. And so I think, it's our conscious, unconscious bias, it's what we're used to. I don't know, sometimes it feels like it's a lack of bravery for us to go. It is our right to do whatever we want to do and do it our way. So just seize the moment and be bold with it. I do feel this need to be polite and conform still. Although that's not the feedback I've had recently from some of the board members at the Conduit. They say I'm very direct, but that's how I feel.
I will play this back to the board who won't recognise that, but...
Okay, so get a good wife, a good husband, a good partner, or a good deputy.
Yeah, and then I think in the workplace, as a leader, I think there are many ways to solve a problem. I think if you're in a boardroom making important decisions, if you're in an ex-com or whatever, you're making big decisions. I think you need to go: are we succeeding or failing right now in the quality of decisions we're making? Are we succeeding or failing right now in the diversity of input and views and maximising what we could achieve? Because if we're failing, let's do something about it. And I think drawing a line and going, we're doing okay, but we're not being as good as we could be, not because we need to improve our data about the number or percentage of women is. We don't have to go through a 20 or a 10-year career or to contribute to that conversation. We can add value in boardroom discussions in different ways. And I think we have to now, given the challenges ahead for all businesses, do that. And that's probably the reason why I love social enterprise a lot. And my bias is towards social enterprise because more likely to have a female leader, far more likely to have a senior team with more women in it. And of course, our diversity challenges is in the different direction. But to any boardroom, to any team making decisions, whatever it is, you cannot make the best possible decision that you can make unless you found a way, either in roles, panel makeup, or data input, that's truly representative and truly diverse.
Yeah, I could talk about this for a long time, but let's move on. Mental health.
If I hear a martini on the third floor after this,
I will
be good.
air all my prejudices about this, and I will also tell you the secret of a good spaghetti bolognese. So, mental health, which is the next chapter in the book structure. you spend a lot of time, Liam, highlighting loneliness and the ongoing taboo around talking around mental health. And sort of slightly linking back to our last theme, Karen says watch out for superhero syndrome, and Chris, when we were talking today, says watch out for Superman syndrome. So we're just going to pick those apart a bit. Karen, what's the caution against superhero syndrome?
Because we're just human beings, right? You know, so things like resilience, energy levels, commitments, staying alive, remembering to go for a wee, have something to eat, not get divorced, you know, all of those things.
Tick.
And
Marry him twice. Tick.
But I guess that you get on a roll, and the book talks about this, where, you know, suddenly, and in my Belu days, it was like, Karen, will you come and open the stock exchange, you know, the day after the Olympics closes, or David Cameron would like you to accompany him to fly to Milan, you know, and raise the flag. And you kind of, it becomes your normal. And there's a great, and of course you're going, you know, got to do this, don't want the personal thing, got to do it, grow the business, got to do it, grow the business. Eventually go, well, actually the BBC, the Radio Times, they're only interested actually in the personal story, so you get more personally involved. And you take, you're on a journey that's really hard to get off. And, you know, there are loads of very good reminders of, you know, learn to rest, not stop, which none of us take heed of until it's far too bloody late often. But it's an addiction that gets fueled and more fueled. And at what point do you stop? And I remember it, I've lived those points of near exhaustion, I'm just going to have to move away, go and live in India and do yoga for a year because I can't take it anymore. You know, those... And how ridiculous is that? Because the whole sentiment of any successful business is you find a sustainable business model. And a sustainable business model needs a sustainable work model for all of the employees and particularly for the leaders. And so get off your high horse, forget you're a leader for a minute, you're a person, you're an asset, it needs to be managed. And it's really difficult that when you're used to wearing your underpants on the outside of your trousers to kind of put it on the other way around.
Chris, that's your cue, Superman.
Well, I think that I totally relate to everything you've just said. And my reference when we were talking earlier, Jo, was related to the previous answer, really, about pushing and pushing and pushing, which a lot of very senior men and women in organisations. But if I go back a few years, there was a board full of men that I spent quite a lot of time with, and I spoke to them all about their lives in one way or another, and they'd all had some kind of crisis in one way, or, you know, from multiple divorces to bankruptcy to various things that had led them to where they were. And I thought this was quite fascinating, and I was saying, well, are you happy with all these choices? And I'm like, God, no. It would be great if we hadn't had to do all of that to get here. And I think that has changed quite a lot in the last few years, but just recognising that there's been some pretty awful sacrifices expected of very senior leaders, and trying to avoid falling into those traps, I think, is now much more in the conversation. But I think on mental health more broadly, one of the most, I guess, the heaviest burdens to carry is to be at least partially responsible for the mental health of others. Right? And this has been a real challenge and a learning for me that I've got wrong in the past. And it's a great lesson to think not everybody is the same as you. So if you have a resilience factor that you are quite comfortable to push up to, and you expect everyone else to do the same, you might break some people along the way. You know, that is a very, very sobering lesson to learn. And one that I always try and keep in mind now.
Yeah, that's quite complicated, isn't it? Liam, last word.
I agree with all that. One of the issues I pick up in the book is, to what extent does... So any organisation will have a lot of that stuff. Is there an extra level of risk for your mental health if you want to solve homelessness, or you want to support unemployed youth in London, or whatever your social thing is? I think you can't just switch off. You go home and worry about it. And I think that there is. So a lot of the people that I have mentored who are, you know, Liam, I am going to end homelessness. Liam, I am going to... I've got a bit of technology that's going to really be the game changer in climate, and are unable to switch off from it. And that, I must do this, I should do this, I am driven to this, other people have failed, I will do it. That, what I call in the book, the maniac element of a lot of change makers, can be incredibly damaging to their own physical and mental health, as well as the people that they work with. And, you know, there's a thing in the book where I talk about one of these maniacs, an amazingly talented person who I think will make amazing change in the world. And when I start mentoring people, I get them to draw a map of their life so I can get some sort of sense of who's sitting in front of me. And when I sat down with this person drew this map of, I'm on this board and I do this, and I'm a fellow of this, and I'm an award winner of this, and I do this, and I've got to raise 50 million quid or whatever it was. And in the middle was a house. And in the house, he'd drawn a little girl who was crying. And I said, who's that? And he said, oh, that's my daughter. And I said, why is she crying? He says, because she doesn't see me enough. Because he's out saving the world. And I said to him, when did you last make love with your wife? And he said, I don't know, last August. I said, so a year ago, or whatever it was. And he went, yeah, that's not good, is it? I said, no, that's not good. So I said, my piece of advice to you is go and get that part of your life sorted out, and then I think you'll be much more effective at doing the other stuff. And then about 6 weeks later, I got a picture on my phone of 2 sets of feet entwined at the end of a bubble bath at a luxury hotel in Hampshire. And
got the other camera the right way around.
I thought, yeah, okay. So, but
that's different to the text that we share.
Yes, yeah. I don't want to see your feet, brother.
Not just gloves off.
But I tell the story. Is Michelle here? Michelle Clother, I'm not sure she's come. Read her book, Own Your Awkward, where she talks about the breakdown that she had. I invested in her company through IV UK. Richard Brass is here, who've set that fund up. And they got, I don't know, 3 or 4 million, is it 3 or 4 million, Richard? Something like that from us. Real success. Like, this is amazing. This Brixton-based social enterprise has got this money. And she said, I just hated going into work. And she felt so guilty about wanting to go into work. She was drinking too much. She wasn't sleeping. And just, I think that really got her down with a sense of, I can't let these young people down. And that sense of, I must help these young people, had become an enormous burden to her that created for her, as she talks about in her book, and talks more about in mine, contributed to a very severe breakdown. So I think that looking after your mental health and your physical health isn't something that you do once you've got the purpose sorted out and you've raised the money. It's in the doing of that you will be more successful at what you do. If I have in front of me as an investor someone who's knackered, hasn't slept, and is like that, I'd be wary of investing in them because they're clearly not looking after what's going to be the biggest asset in the company, which is them.
I mean, that for me was one of probably my big growing up moments in my Blue days, which were 12 years. It's when the penny drops and that, if I get run over by a bus here, what happens to this thing? Does the impact still happen? The goal for me is I wanted to be able to pass £1 million a year. So £1 million of net profit every year for a small business is a big deal, right? And so if something happens to me, what happens? And because I'm behaving like it can't function without me. Yeah. I never turn my phone off. I've only got one kidney left to give. I'm that far, on the resilience piece. And when I suddenly went, hang on, this is about having a sustainable business model. This is about me looking at this business, working on the model, getting it to be sustainable without me. And that's when I wrote, here's 3 years to my exit. I'm trying to avoid the bus in the meantime, but here's the path to go, and actually success isn't £1 million next year or the year after. Success is about it not needing me. What's important is the business model and its impact, not any one person. And that's your route out of this superhero syndrome.
But part of the problem of breaking out of that era is the social enterprise world, the social entrepreneur world rewards the Messiah model, and it rewards the individual brilliant individual hero-preneur, and I think that just needs to stop. It really needs to stop.
What Karen said put me in mind of, I remember Tony Blair saying in a conference speech, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, you will find another Prime Minister, but my kids won't find another dad. Not allowed to, I'm very impartial, but I think we can all recognise the truth of that. Right, we're approaching a fork in the road, ladies and gentlemen. It's 8 o'clock. We've been wanging on for about 1 hour and 20 minutes. So I think we should do a question time style vote. We can take a few questions, or we can have some stirring last words from Liam and retire to the bar.
Do you want questions, or should we
Either
end?
way. I'm going to ask for a show of
Questions?
hands.
Show of hands. Who wants to go?
Show of,
Honestly,
who wants some questions?
Who wants to go to the
It
bar?
doesn't mean you have to ask them, just if you'd like to hear, if you'd be interested in having some questions.
No, bar.
Who wants to go to the bar? Right, okay, it's pretty evenly split. Let's do a Blair. Let's take our inspiration from Blair. Let's do the middle way, and let's have 3 questions. And Liam, you can choose because it's your
3
night.
questions?
Yeah, I'm taking the middle way.
So I saw someone I love over there for the first time, and I got distracted.
Okay, let me bring you back to the room. Here's
Yes.
what happened. We took a vote. It was split.
Yes.
50% want to go to the bar, 50% want questions. So
Right.
we're going to compromise. We're going to have 3 questions, and then we're going to go to the bar.
Brilliant.
That's the first question.
All right. So I'm
Right.
going to ask a question.
Yes, I'm saying you can choose the questions because it's your night. Right, now if you do want
choose
to
the
ask a
question.
question,
Put your hand
now
up,
you can
you'll
put your
ask
hand
the
up.
Hello.
Do we need a mic? Wait for the mic, wait for the mic.
I have quite a loud voice. So actually, okay, because of the recording maybe. Hello. I'm Zay. I think we've spoken a few times before. I've met your daughter somewhere here a while ago. Anyway, that's irrelevant. So, what I wanted to ask you was, have you got, maybe this is from people you've worked with or people you've mentored, have you got any perspectives or insights maybe in terms of lessons maybe that you've identified or things that you would suggest to people from minoritized communities, to people who are leaders of social enterprises from minoritized communities? I do work with migrant communities, so my perspective is more like when it comes to leaders from migrant backgrounds. I'm curious, have you had any particular insights, or what kind of suggestions have you made when people have challenges related to those identities as a leader?
In my mentoring practice, I would say the majority of people I have mentored are people from people of colour, people from minority communities, and the sort of obstacles they face because of their background are not usually the things that we talk about. They're the same sorts of things that turn up. So I don't have a direct answer to that. It's not something that comes up a lot with the people that I mentor. But I think that what I do notice in inside your question is that there can be other levels of obstacles that need to be come over from those organisations when it comes to things like funding, because the facts are that a lot of companies led by people from those communities are less likely to get funded than others. And my mentoring tries to be really practical. And so if I had one person who was facing that, and so I didn't really get into the sort of bigger issues of systemic issues, why is that happening? I just went and helped her get some funding. So that's what I very much see my mentoring is trying to be really practical and help the people I mentor move forward, and if it's money or whatever it is, try and get it for them.
Totally agree. Get practical, make it not matter, achieve what you want to achieve anyway, and use your success as part of solving that problem.
Okay, anybody else got a question? And do wave, because thank you.
Hi, I'm Pablo, a fellow suffering social entrepreneur. I think it's a question for you, Liam. You're obviously a great mentor. You're blunt. You're funny. You're rude.
Insightful.
No, just the first 3. But and it kind of works. Who has helped you? Have you had a mentor? Who has been your inspiration and helped you on that journey so that you can give back?
So many people. I mean, one of the reasons why I try and be a helpful mentor is I had so many people help me come up. So when I first became a CEO in Liverpool, running a social enterprise there, I had no fucking idea when I got in there what I should do. I had no preparation as a leader, and discovered that a lot of the levers that I should be pulling to make things happen, there was nothing. They weren't connected to anything. And there were 2 really different people. There's a man called Ronnie Hughes, who's a sort of ex-housing association guy, a bit of a hippie, open-toed sandals, long hair, and we would go for a walk around the Mystery, which is a park in Liverpool. I've just made this connection. I like doing walkie-talkies, and I think I got that from Ronnie. And he really helped me when I was panicking about what I should do, kept bringing me back to, why do you want to do this work? I then recruited a chair called Graham Morris, who had just left as the CEO of Rolls-Royce cars. He'd fallen out with the Germans, as he called them, who had bought the company. And he helped me in really different ways. I was really worried that I didn't understand finances and a balance sheet and all that sort of stuff. And Graham said to me, who's still around, great guy, he was like, I'm not going to help you with all that sort of psychodrama shit. I can't help you with that, Liam. What I can help you with is helping you understand this business. And the thing that was so good about Graham was he knew in his little finger more about business and more about financing and more about EBITDA and all of those things that I ever will in my entire life, but was able to mentor me and help me learn without for 1 second patronizing me, condescending to me. So I'd say Graham Morris and Ronnie Hughes. I've learned a lot from this woman here. We haven't explicitly called it a mentoring relationship. I've learned a lot, and there's some other people in this room, Jane Clubb, I would mention, who I have turned to in times when I really don't know what to do here. Can you help me? And I think I have really benefited from that and continue to, and that's what makes me think what I do is, worthwhile. I want to continue doing it into my dotage.
Okay, one more in our halfway house deal.
Hi, my name's Ali. My question is, do you equate purpose with happiness? And can you have purpose but not be happy?
Chris.
I'm glad I came. I think you're qualified for this one, Liam, don't you?
That's a really, really good question. So I have met people recently who have an incredibly strong purpose but are really unhappy, and I can't name names, but someone I met relatively recently who is, from the outside, is, you go, wow, look at the work that person is doing. This is a genuine change maker here. Spent some time talking to that person, thought, Jesus, not happy, deeply, deeply, deeply unhappy. So that was an example of having a strong purpose. But I think that's where the alignment comes. Maybe purpose is the wrong word for that. Very busy, had some goals, but I think that it goes back to what I was saying before. If you don't get aligned with that change objective you have, that purpose, with the platform, which includes your health, the people around you, the love you give, the love that you receive, as well as money, you just will not last the course, and you'll burn out. And again, I'll end. Well, anyway, I'm going to stop there.
No, I want to just say really briefly for me, we've got happiness is an outcome, it's not a destination. And I think, no, it's absolutely an outcome. It can come in small glimpses each day, it can become big bursts, it can be absent for a lot of time. And I think, it's also about perspective. I think on tough days, for me at Belu, it's a real reminder of, is there happiness? Do I need to stop and ask, rather than just expect to be shrouded by it, And it's about context, because, if I would stop and go, pull yourself together here, you've turned the tap on, walked over, got a drink of water several times a day, every time you wanted. You're doing, great, in Liam's book a lot, you wanted to do this. You're making good progress. This is what you choose. You're failing in recognising some of the outcomes because you're so bloody busy and so fast. The job is never done right. None of us have solved the issues we're trying to solve. Few of us have that. And there is a bit about stop, think, reflect, and just feel it. Just feel it.
I say in the book, if you do an honest take. So I've been at this game for a long time. Whatever you want to call it. Social enterprise, purpose-driven business, social. The world is fucking worse than it was when I started. I'm a son of Irish immigrants. The social mobility that I experienced and I'm sure some of the people in this room have, doesn't happen anymore in this country. The climate is worse. Inequality of wealth is worse.
Yeah, but
And
infant mortality is better. Absolute
Yeah,
poverty is
yeah.
down. Stephen Pinker would disagree. Crime rates are down across the world.
Yes.
Wars are down.
Yes, so it's complicated. So have I succeeded in this purpose-driven career? Are we succeeding? So I think that, I don't know, but I like doing this, and so I'll continue to do it.
But the other thing is if you make the purpose of work for you to make you happy, arguably you're setting yourself up to fail, right? A lot of the time, happiness is about life, not just work. Work is a big part of life, but it's not your whole life. Or certainly it shouldn't be if you've got a great mentor like Liam.
We have one little contribution to that question over here. I'm over here. From Ilona. Do you want to go on?
Okay. Sorry, I'm stealing the stage to say I'll give an answer to your question, because there is a great guy, behavioral scientist Paul Dolan, who has a happiness formula, which is you have the perfect balance of purpose and pleasure. And if you have like the 45 degrees of purpose and pleasure, that's happiness. There you go.
Definitely sounds like a cue
Where have
for
you
the
been
bar.
for the last hour and a half?
Liam, do you want to do any stirring last words, or should we just pivot to pleasure?
I have no stirring last words, but I want to do some thank yous. I want to thank you guys. I've enjoyed this. I hope everyone has. Oh, yeah, sorry. I have no stirring words. They're all in the book. Buy it. I just want to thank you guys for a really interesting conversation, and Dave for being here. But there's three women I wanted to thank. That was a bit glib, wasn't it? Should we pick it up when we walk next time? Okay. There's three women I want to thank. This book would not be here if it wasn't for three women. The first woman is Helen Coyle, who I sent her a draft of something like this 2 years ago, and in her lovely, lovely way, I'm paraphrasing now, said, "It's a bit shit, Liam, and it needs to be rewritten. Maybe you could think about it like this," and unlocked what became this. The second woman is Alison here, who runs Practical Inspiration Publishing. It was unbelievable. If you're thinking of doing a book, talk to this woman. It's been an absolute pleasure. And then the final woman is sitting here, who is Maggie, who at the end of the book I said in a list of thanks, and of course Maggie for so much for so long. So thank you. This book wouldn't be here. Yeah, it's been a long time, isn't it? This book wouldn't be here. She said to me last year, "For God's sake, Liam, stop wanging on about this effing book and get it done." She doesn't say effing. I'm paraphrasing. So we went to Ireland, and she said, "We're going to Ireland, and you're going to write that book. And I will cook and I will clean, I'll do all of that, so long as you promise to write the book." And I got most of the manuscript done then, I was able to send there. So those three women, thank you very much. That's why this book is here.